Hi, welcome to the Stitch TV show. I'm Lynn.
And I'm Pam. We're happy you're joining us today. The Stitch is an online quilt talk show, the perfect soundtrack for your sewing room. You can join us for tutorial videos, virtual stitch-ins, and book clubs. I'm trying to bring the suspense. You can learn more at thestitchtvshow.com.
Our show today is brought to you by our friends at EnMart and QT Fabrics. You can learn more about them in the links to the show notes.
So I still really like the fabric. That's a good thing when you're sewing with the fabric for so long and you're like, hooray, I still like it.
I really like it, yes. But we need to talk about the purple cotton thread from,
I know.
And it's polycore wrapped, so it's stronger.
No hint of lint.
Than regular cotton.
Yes.
Because of the polycore in it. So, yes, and lots of great colors. And this
is this one the grape one or tulip?
This is,
I think it's the tulip.
Tulip. Bright tulip.
Bright tulip.
So, no dull tulip here. There you go.
Take that, all you dull tulips. I think that's called a matte finish.
I would say yes.
Tulips.
That's called a duck face.
2 lips, 4 lips, 6 lips, $1, as my dad says frequently, with no context. Dad jokes. That's where I get it. No, but I love it because it's the no hint of lint, and it saves you from having to unleash the horror of your bobbin case upon your sewing table.
Well, it is something that we're going to talk about with our first topic.
Which we're not getting to yet.
No, we're not going to talk.
Hold the phone.
We're not going to talk about what we're going to talk about yet.
We're going to wait to talk about that
because we'll talk so that we can talk. But we've got EnMart threads and QT Fabrics, and I still love them both. So.
Which, hey, could go with the quilt hanging behind us.
They could, absolutely. Which is a new pattern.
Tell us more about that in a bit.
So today, but wait, we need to talk about what we're going to talk about now.
Yes, what are we going to be talking about?
Computerized sewing machines and monochromatic quilts. We're joined by our newest quilted pattern, Flight of Fancy. This is a great selfie quilt because you can stand right here and look like you have little, it's awesome.
Antennas and wings.
Right, exactly, as we all need.
Yes.
So, or a baby quilt, and you can find the pattern at our shop, shop.thestitchtvshow.com.
So,
yes,
Lynn, what is up?
Pam, I am getting ready for festival.
Yes, we've just been discussing our outfits.
Yes, we have, honestly.
Literally outfits.
I just said, because, and you can find these online already, but we have leggings that go with a quilt that we've made. And I was telling her I just bought a shirt that go with the leggings. And I'll send her the link so she can get a shirt that go with the leggings.
I already have a shirt that goes with the leggings.
You do?
I have a gray one. So the attention then is on the leggings.
Oh, okay.
So
I bought a blue shirt, which is a outlier in my closet. Because, like, honestly, my closet is mostly oranges and reds and mustards and yellows. That's 90% of my shirts are those colors.
Mine is mostly blue.
And I have very few blue shirts, and I actually bought a blue shirt.
Well, there you go.
So there you go. It'll be odd for me.
But this was one of the things that we have been prepping.
Yes. So Pam designed it, and I got to quilt it. And it was fun.
So many more failed versions of this quilt than what we ended up with.
We did have some.
And there will. I will have
calls.
Once they're quilted and finished, I will get them loaded on the shop site, so you can see like what it looks like in other colorways.
Well, and also kind of as pattern designers, what we go through too, because I think that's kind of interesting. Mm-hmm. Like there are some things that where you start, you don't always end up with. And this went through. Of course, Pam makes fun of me because when I do EQ8, I have fun with all of the different color combinations. And I'll send her a file with like 30 quilts in it. And she's like,
delete, 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 delete.
And then I get the file back and all of them are gone. So here's what I've decided. I send a file and then I keep my own file.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
I don't. So I don't get those deleted. So, because they don't all make it into the final
They do
version.
not. So this is the 4th iteration of this quilt.
At least.
The 4th.
The 4th physical iteration is probably, I don't know, the 20th. Remember I played with this a bunch.
Oh, yeah.
The 20th, like EQ8 iteration.
Now, I will say the first one actually got given as a baby quilt, and I gave instructions that said, for this quilt, lay it on the ground. Put your baby on the body so the baby looks like it has wings. Take photos. Send me the photo, please. Also, your baby may be famous.
This is how you get a famous baby.
But there's a pink version, and that will end up in the listing for the pattern, just so you can see, like, oh, here's what it looks like with a white background and a pink butterfly. And
right, exactly.
So you get a sense, because this is something that we've chosen because the light blue in the centers of the blocks make the orange pop, and it really glows, which is a nice effect. But there's many
Especially with the dark teal background. I really like that.
So, our first topic, which is something that a lot of people search for because they just don't know, do I need a computerized sewing machine? What's the benefit? Is it worth the cost? Because
they are more expensive.
They are much more expensive.
Yes.
Like a good old mechanical stitch with, maybe a straight stitch and a zigzag and a buttonhole if you're lucky.
Right.
Like, that's pretty standard. But then you start getting into fancy stitches, and then the price tag starts going up.
Right.
Is it worth it?
Yes.
For you?
Yes. The first thing I wrote down on my card is yes, please. I really like my computerized sewing machines. I don't use I have a featherweight. It's a great machine. I don't use it. I sit down and use my computerized ones. And I do have a couple of just standard straight stitch, the featherweight, and I have a few others, and I have more sewing machines than I want to admit, but I like my computerized, yes. I like the variety of stitches, and you know that with the postcard class and like Crazy Modern and some other stuff. And I go to the store going, how many stitches can I get? I want the most stitches, but that's me. That's my, choice. I would say most quilters, though, use 2, maybe 3 stitches on your sewing machine.
Mm. I used to use straight stitch and then a serpentine stitch. And my current machine, which I love, lacks 2 of my favorite stitches. Doesn't have a serpentine stitch, which is like kind of a gentle curve. It has one that does this in a curve, but it's too tight for what I would want to see for quilting in a border. Because I used to use it for skinny borders, just do a 1/4 inch in from either side. So it doesn't have that. And then there wasn't a blanket stitch on it that I liked. So I had to...
You programmed yours.
I programmed my own, which is a lot of Googling.
Well,
and
that's...
user groups and documentation.
Depending upon the machine, yes.
Yes.
Some are easier than others. Mine's really not that hard to program.
It's not once you know what you're doing, but if you're...
Right. If
for
you're
someone
new to
that
it,
is just expecting to sit down and start sewing, you're like, oh no, what is this?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's what makes a computerized kind of unique, is that you can design your own stitches, which is kind of cool. You can add stuff from other stitches and change it, and you can make them wider, you can make them skinnier, you can lengthen them, shorten them, and that can give you even more variety than you already have with the stitches that you have, which is harder to do with a non-computerized machine. But that being said, my caution for a computerized machine is you really need, for the computer to stay healthy, you need to clean out the lint more often than you would with just a straight stitch machine.
And that's more than just the bobbin case. You're talking about a servicing by a professional, or remove the cover yourself and do it?
Well, I'll remove the cover myself and do it. But if you're not comfortable with that, one, we've got a good friend, sewingdoc.com, that shows you how to take stuff off and do those kind of things. But the other thing is take it to someone who will do that. But you want to make sure that dust, I mean, we all know dust is kind of the bad thing to get into computers. You don't want to. So that's the thing that I would say. Make sure you are generating lint just by sewing.
Yeah.
So make sure you're cleaning out your bobbin case and your needle plate, that area, because you don't want to get the dust into the machine and it's already, you're creating it. So that's one thing I would say, very much so. So you use your straight stitch more often than I do, though.
Yeah,
right?
I don't do as many of the types of projects that you do that benefit from computerized stitches. And so I keep going back and forth like, gosh, could I get away with just a straight up mechanical straight stitch machine? I think I do enough of the fancier things that it's worth it for me to keep what I've got.
Right.
But I mean, it's a rare occasion. Like it's not every month that I'm making something that uses a specialty stitch.
Well, and it's not, I mean, once you buy a computerized machine, it's not like you're trading it in every 2 years for a new model. I don't think so. I mean, I think once you buy the machine, you're kind of gonna have it for a while.
Yeah.
And so I guess I've had my newest one for 6 years now, but I had my other one for 15.
I've had mine for 9. I got it when I started my podcast back in 2010.
And the only reason, okay, and this is something that I think is changed, but I think a caution is, or something you want to ask questions about when you're looking at computerized sewing machines, is how do they update the machine? Mm-hmm. Because the machine that I had earlier got to where it couldn't be updated. And it was because technology changed.
Did it have to connect to a regular computer to do that update?
Yes, it did. And it had to have a 12-pin
connector cable?
Which
doesn't exist on most commercial laptops now.
Not
or
anymore,
desktops.
Yeah. So that was the reason I had to.
So my day job is in cybersecurity. And one of the reasons that the big breach at Target that happened a few years ago is because all of their cash registers ran on Windows 3.1, which is no longer supported by Microsoft, even for years before the breach happened. And because they couldn't keep the software updated on the machines, they actually got hacked through one of their third-party vendors. I think it was like their HVAC vendor.
It was.
Like someone got in and then through that vulnerability in the Windows 3.1 operating system was able to like scrape all the credit card numbers from people that had shopped at Target. And so that is why things go out of date and are hazardous of like, well, I've got this great vintage machine. It connects to a Windows machine. Like, oh, but not Windows 10, which is what the common standard is now. So you really have to watch out for that. I
would ask questions just, you know.
Because it's going to come back to bite you and it won't be as useful.
Right.
And, what you can do with it. And if there is a problem, it's like, well, we don't even support this anymore. Kind of like Microsoft saying, we don't support Windows 3.1.
Well, and that's what happened to me. It's not that they don't support the machine. It's just there was no way to, unfortunately, to connect it. And unfortunately, the way this was designed at the time, which was top of the line, back when I bought it 20 years ago, you would connect to the computer and you could change out your stitches because the chip apparently in the sewing machine only held, like 24 stitches. So when you connect to the computer, you could get the other 80 stitches that came with the program. Well, when you can't connect to the computer anymore, you lost those 80 stitches because they weren't programmed into your machine. So that was one of my,
limiting factors
and reasons to go get the new one.
I think a lot of modern machines are using more common swappable tech, like a USB stick, which goes back. Now, there are different standards of USB. Yeah. So even if it's a USB 1 versus 2 or 3,
Yeah.
which is, I think the current standard is USB 3. And you know that if the little plastic thing on the inside is blue,
Oh,
I think
really?
that's the more modern one. Because look at your laptop.
Yeah.
So we got new laptops earlier this year. But look at it. One of the ports has the black and the other one has the blue. The blue is the more modern, which means the faster USB connection. A little bit of computer
There you
knowledge
go.
for y'all.
But, I think that those are things that you need to think about. I have a older embroidery machine, which is computerized, of course, and it takes a USB stick to get the designs onto the machine so that I can stitch them out. So when you buy a new design, it's a computerized design, you put it on a USB stick, whatever. The problem is my sewing machine doesn't like really big USB sticks. So I have...
Like a 256 megabyte instead of a 3 gig or something.
Right. So I have this one that I know it likes that I have to keep cleaning off so that I can put it in there and it can read it. Because if you put in a 3 gig...
Doesn't know where to look.
It's
so
like,
much room. I'm lost in a mansion.
I can't find it. What's happened? So those are things that you kind of, figure out by trial and error on that one. But those are downsides to although I don't know how you're going to do and I know we're not talking about embroidery machines, but those are always going to need some kind of technology to connect to.
Software. And
Yeah,
whatnot.
software.
Now, so my machine, which is a Janome 6600, is considered a computerized sewing machine, but doesn't need any of that interface. Like it's all in the machine itself.
My new one's all in the machine.
Yeah. And so there's like a little tiny screen that I can use to, program stuff, to stitch selection. There's a whole lot of buttons, like a lot of buttons.
Mine's all on a screen, it's touch
A lot of
screen.
buttons.
Yeah. But mine's newer and I just bought it like 6 years ago. It was one of the things that I treated myself to. I got a little money from my mother's estate and I bought myself a sewing machine. So it was a good use of that money because it was expensive, but I think my mom would be happy that I have a sewing machine, so that's kind of cool. So, but dust it more often for sure.
Yeah.
That's definitely.
So what kind of projects are you doing that you need a computerized sewing machine for versus a regular straight stitch?
Well, because I do the postcards and I do specialty stitches on, like a crazy quilt or whatever, those I like that. Now, do you need it to quilt? Absolutely not. No, you don't have to have a computerized machine. If you can straight stitch, if you have some kind of zigzag and you can drop your feed dogs, you could make a quilt.
Or you don't necessarily have to drop them because that can affect machine tension, but you can set your stitch length to 0.
Oh, that's
so
true.
the motion of the feed dogs is like up, back, down, back. When you set your stitch length to 0, they just go up and down, but they're not trying to move the fabric.
Right.
So that's what I do. Or you could just tape like a little piece of cardboard or
Over
like a
it,
business
yeah.
card over them so they're not affecting how the fabric moves through for free motion. But you need to be able to have a different sewing foot. You need a darning foot or a free motion foot.
Right.
Sometimes those are interchangeable. And those don't necessarily come standard with machines. I think most of them do now.
I had to buy my darning foot that I really like. The one that I wanted was an open toe darning foot, so it looks like a C instead of an O.
You just get better visibility.
And I get
That's what
better
found.
visibility. Yeah, so I had to buy that one. So, but no, do you need a computerized sewing machine if you are just piecing? No,
Yeah.
you don't.
I end up using
You can make a quilt on a cheap Walmart.
Oh, I made a king size quilt on
Yes.
Walmart Singer.
Yes, exactly. You can on a less than $200 machine.
It was the graduation present that I got from high school.
And I've taught classes, beginner classes of these students who bring in these inexpensive machines, and they work.
They're just as successful at making quilts as the person next to them with the fancy
and
machine.
they made a quilt. They made the whole thing. Now, there are some things about your higher-end machines and computerized sewing machines that, wow, make life a lot easier.
Thread cutting, like, boop, push a button, it cuts the thread.
Yes, but not even that. Like, the tension adjustments on computerized sewing machines are almost already programmed in, so you don't have to mess with your tension. Whereas if you have a straight stitch machine, you're going to have to play with that, and that's a learning curve. Of wait a minute, it's looping on top instead of on bottom. What do I need to change? And I think,
but I have
once you got
that
it set,
even
you're
on
fine.
on my computerized machine, I had to go through that to figure out like what's my ideal tension setting for straight stitch, like piecing versus quilting. So I would disagree.
See, I've not changed mine at all. Rarely touch it.
Do you have like an automatic tension setting?
Yeah.
Yeah, see, I don't. Mine is still dials. So like it's 4 is the standard. You know, it goes down to 1 or up to 8 or 9, I think.
Yeah. No, mine's all computerized, so there's no me changing. I can change it, but it's not manual. So it's already, I mean, and that's one of the advantages of some of the higher end machines. And I bought a pretty high end machine. At the time, it was the best machine that they made from this company. And if you've seen any of my videos, you probably know what company it is too. Because you can see the name on it.
Now, I will say for these types of machines, you typically want to buy from a dealer that you like. You walk in and you feel like they're friendly and knowledgeable, because these aren't typically sold through big box stores.
Correct.
The higher end ones. And so
they have computerized machines at the big box stores, but they're not the high end ones, yeah.
Yeah. So what I did was, what's a brand that I like, and do I like the vendor for it in my area? Do I enjoy going back to their store? Do I like the people there? So I've seen people that really like a brand of machine but hate their local dealer.
Yeah.
They're like, I don't like the people there.
I will say this, though. I think in choosing a computerized sewing machine, not only the dealer, but look at, do they teach classes on how to use that machine? I will say that even though I'm a, pretty seasoned sewist, the classes were so informative because they were talking about stuff that I didn't do. But they were enough little tips that I was like, oh, that makes life easier. Oh, now I know how. They teach you how to clean out the machine. They teach you how to adjust the bobbin. They teach you all of those kinds of things, as well as that's where I learned to program stitches. And they walked me exactly through how I needed to do it. So it wasn't the Googling. It was really easy because I had directions from them. And it was really good classes. And it was a series of, if you buy a new machine, they give you, I don't know, this dealer gave me like 3 or 4 classes free.
1 or 2 with mine when I got it.
Yeah. And so they want you to be successful on the sewing machine. So, yeah. There's a lot of advantages in working with the dealer and buying it from a dealer. You may be paying more for it than you could find it online, but I don't know, you're supporting a local business, and 2, you're establishing a relationship that, is going to help you out later.
And there are a lot of specialty discussion groups. So when I first got my machine, there was a very vibrant YouTube group, or not YouTube, Yahoo.
Those have gone away.
It still exists because I went back to it. I'm like, does it still exist? Yep, still does.
Is it vibrant still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Most of them have moved into Facebook groups or even private, particular boards on different communities. So just do a search to see where's their group. For my sit-down mid-arm machine, there's a very active group on Facebook there for that. So that's a good place to go and just ask, or even search before you ask, because there's nothing those groups hate more or get aggravated by more than someone showing up like, I just bought this machine, what do I do? Like, how do I get started? And you're like, There's literally a pinned post about how to get started. So you can be like, I just got mine. I'm so excited. But, take advantage of what's already been discussed and published and all of that. Just a little social media savviness.
Yeah, that is definitely social media savviness. Yeah, there's I think you can find groups on Facebook with any brand, because I know my long arm has a pretty active group. That company does. And they're great about answering questions on, hey, I got this weird thing happening. Somebody was talking the other day. I noticed that I was getting a lot of thread breaks, and I looked at, there's a thread guide that they call a pigtail because it looks like a pigtail to guide your thread through, and it had worn a groove in it, and it was what was causing the thread break. And I was like, what a great thing for me to go look at, or at least have in my mind that if I'm seeing this on a consistent basis, instead of assuming it's a needle or it's a this or that, it's just another thing I can go, troubleshoot kind of deal. So they're very helpful, very helpful. So anything else about computerized sewing machines?
I think we've covered a whole lot.
We both have them. So,
we have them.
And we like them. All right. Now we're going to take a closer look at Flight of Fancy, and we'll be right back. Hello, welcome back. We're now going to talk about monochromatic quilts.
Yes. What is a monochromatic quilt, Lynn?
It is one color with tints, shades, and tones of the same color.
Okay.
Do you know what a tint is?
That is the amount of white or black you add to the color.
Tint is the amount of white.
Oh,
shade is the amount of black.
And
tone. I knew you were going to say that. I was waiting for that. And tone is the gray that you would add. So, and a hue is the purest color of that, the purest form of that color.
With no white
or
gray or black.
Or black in it, right. Yeah. So monochromatic is any of those variations of that hue.
And it's not always black or white or gray.
No.
Because
I think a lot of people think that, though.
Yeah.
No. So this has got a monochromatic
element.
Exactly. The oranges are monochromatic.
Yes.
And it doesn't have to be, because we deal in quilts and prints, it doesn't have to be solids.
Right.
It can be a print that can lend itself to a monochromatic feel.
Yes. And so I wrote down
here's
note.
One note.
One bullet point, but there's two parts to it.
Okay.
It is successful far away based on the use of value.
And value is?
The lightness to darkness of it. So if you took a black and white photo, for these, the way the pattern is written, like fabric 1, fabric 2, fabric 3, for the wing colors. And fabric 1 is the lightest, and fabric 6 is the darkest.
Right.
That's how it was designed. Now, you could flip that because it's your quilt, and we're not
care.
the quilt police, so go crazy.
You can do whatever you want.
Yeah. So this, to me, to be far away, successful far away visually, you need value difference and edge, or it just kind of looks like a blob of color. And where you start to see interest closer up is the introduction of prints. And so from far away, it's like, ooh, shades of orange. When you get up close, you're like, ooh, there's a dot, and there's a heart, and there's a stripy thing, and a flower.
Right.
And so the impact of the print, unless it's not a monochromatic print, because most of these are orange on orange, yes, as opposed to this, which has tiny white dots, or this one, which also has like little white dots in it. From far away, they're still going to read solid-ish.
Yeah, this totally reads solid. And this has got 2 versions of teal.
Yes.
But it does read solid.
Yeah.
Especially probably from the camera.
So it's the difference in order to have both, like interest far away and close up, particularly if it's an art quilt or something hanging in a show, you need to pay attention to both.
I agree. Completely. When I looked up, I just got curious. So I looked up what did monochromatic mean. And it was talking about it's one color, and it's the different tints and hues. But what else it said, and I thought this was good, is it evokes the feeling of design. So monochromatic quilts, and I'm not just saying quilts, monochromatic, if you were decorating a room, evokes the feeling of design. So if you have, a living room and you're like, blue's my favorite color, then you can use different shades of blue in your living room that is going to evoke a feeling of this is well designed. It's not just, I put stuff in here kind of thing. And I thought that gives you a very much a sense of thoughtfulness in your quilt when you're doing monochromatic, because it does take another, I think it takes a design to the next level. You're not just putting in scraps, or it's not just orange. You're going, oh, this is an orange, but then I'm breaking it out into different shades, tints, tones of orange that give me this sense of well-planned design kind of thing, which I like. And I think this is well-planned. I like how we ended up with this.
It only took like 5 tries.
It did. Took a few times. But what else I was going to say in monochromatic stuff is I do think this is 5 shades of orange.
6.
Is it 6?
The solid is the 6th. Yes.
Oh, okay. Right.
Well, technically the 4th, but
It's number 4.
I stared at this pattern a lot.
I think that, you definitely want to do monochromatic, you definitely want to have more than 3.
Yes.
Otherwise, it just looks like 2 colors. A 3 or more, and I think when you get into odd numbers, it's really successful. This one works out with 6. In my brain, it was 5, but I was thinking just on the wings and not necessarily the body kind of thing. So I would do more. I would definitely do more shades, and or tints or hues, whichever. But it's definitely something, when we laid this out, I laid it out going, okay, this one moves into this one moves into this one.
Yes.
So
thoughtfulness.
Yeah, there was thoughtfulness in it. Definitely. But you can do a lot with monochromatic. Do you want to
Yes, we're going to look at the thing.
We're going to look at the thing. Okay, so this is a quilt that I made. It was a self-portrait. It was some kind of challenge. And so I took a picture. Well, actually, Mike took a picture of me. And then I used, and it was me kind of laying on it. I think it was this table, actually.
No, girl, I bought this table. This is not this table.
No, it was.
No, you did this challenge well before we started the stitch.
Oh, okay. I couldn't remember. So, but it's all of these are just shades of green, and those shades of green read that you look at my face. So this is me dreaming about quilt patterns in shades of green.
Which she doesn't usually. She's not a big green user.
I think they gave us a fabric and we had to use it.
The fabric is from a challenge that the Modern Quilt Guild did, but you did it as part of a challenge for our other guild that was you must use lime green and polka dots in a self-portrait quilt.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
You mashed 2 challenges together.
I didn't have time to do 2 challenges. Just do them all in one. So, and you can see it hasn't been quilted yet.
That is true. It has not been quilted yet.
Anyway, so, but you can use monochromatic to make portraits. And actually, that was how I learned how to make portraits, was using monochromatic. Mm-hmm. The hard part about it is finding, go look in your stash. Most people will either need to buy more lights or more darks because they have so many mediums they can't pull a monochromatic together.
Mm-hmm. It just ends up looking kind of flat and muddled.
Yeah, and it goes back to your point with value. And I use the black and white on the camera on my phone a lot to check that kind of stuff. So, and you only need 4 or 5 shades to do a portrait.
Are there types of patterns more suited to monochromatic than others? Like, what would you look for? Like, if you look at a commercial pattern and you're like, I want to buy this and I want to make it monochromatic. Like, should it have X number of different fabrics in it? It doesn't matter. Like, do we have any guidelines for the people?
No, but I think if you're just starting out with monochromatic and you're doing a pattern that repeats the block is repetitive. In other words, it's the same block over and over, like a log cabin. That could be an extremely successful monochromatic because it would allow you to not concentrate on the design of the block, but the fabric in the block and changing that fabric with the consistency of the block not changing. I think for beginners of dealing with monochromatic, that may make it much more successful because you're taking out an element of design that you don't have to think about. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So if you're just starting out, that's an easy way to kind of ease into it and be like, my friend loves blue. I want to make her a blue quilt. No, I do not want white or black or any other color.
Right.
Just blue.
And log cabin has a light side and a dark side traditionally. And so that kind of lets you think, okay, so all the light blues go over here, all the dark blues go over here. And the beautiful thing about a log cabin is you can rearrange the light and darks and get barn raising, sunshine and shadows, furrows, all different layout. And just look up layouts of log cabin quilt and you will get...
Because you get very different results if you leave off the word quilt.
quilt. And you will get all these different choices of how to lay out a log cabin. And it would be very... I think that is a great, beginner quilt. I think it's a great beginner quilt. And I think it kind of helps you do that monochromatic on your own. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So what one would you do for...
I don't know. What she said. That's why I asked the question. Half the time I'm asking questions because I don't know. Like, she's smart at stuff. I'll ask her.
Well, I was thinking, what would you do? I mean, if you were going to do... you wanted to do a monochromatic quilt, what kind of pattern would you use?
Well, when I think of, like, basic blocks.
Flight of fancy.
Well, I mean, sure. But I think of like the Jacob's Ladder block, which is a mix of 4 patches and half square triangles.
Oh,
that
right.
You could get away with doing that in 2 fabrics where you could have a light blue and a dark blue.
Right.
And you could experiment a bit. So with placement, where if you have light blue as a background and medium blue for kind of your focus in one area of the quilt, and then you kind of graduate to where at the other end of the quilt, you get to a medium value for your background and a dark value. Like, you can kind of experiment with getting an ombre effect and still keep it monochromatic, because all you're doing is making half square triangles and 4 patches, and you can get to a level of scrappiness, but you have to be really thoughtful about what you're calling light and medium and dark. And it requires you to have space to lay out and the ability to not have a cat run through and like mix your fabrics all up, which maybe is why I haven't done that yet.
I think to do a monochromatic quilt, the layout and placement of the blocks is definitely, of the fabric in the blocks is definitely going to lend to that more thoughtful, evoking a feeling of design. If that's what the goal of monochromatic is, to evoke a feel of design, then it's going to be more thoughtful in placing the fabrics. And you really are going to have to look at be honest about your stash and go, do I have
A range.
the darks and the lights? And remember, this fabric can be a dark and it can be a light. It depends on what I match up to it.
Yeah.
So, I would say this is normally a medium, but it can be depending upon what you're putting with it. Like if I put all burgundies with this one, the red down here, this is the light. But if I put all pinks with this is the dark. So I think you just have to be really honest and look at your fabric differently than I think most people do.
So let's talk thread for a minute, because quilting is another layer that you're adding on to.
Oh, gosh, yes.
So let's say you were doing a monochromatic blue quilt, light blue, dark blue. What kind of thread color? Are you breaking thread and only quilting with dark thread in one? Like, how are you making sure that you kind of keep the crispness of the design and the piecing?
And not.
Do you use a variegated? Do you pick a completely different thread color?
See, to me, variegated is going to add interest or add, it'll like attract that. This one, I actually switched colors for the teal. I used a teal. I used the light blue. Well, it was actually a gray, I think, for the light blue. But I used the same orange in whatever orange I was doing. And you can tell, you can see the quilting in the lighter ones because it was kind of a pretty strong orange. But you really can't see it in the dark ones. Mm-hmm. And it's funny to me. I think that it's only going to really be as if you're using a contrasting color. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
So if you used red thread on your blue monochromatic quilt,
you're going to see it, yeah. And it may not read red. It
but
may
you could go
read
with
like...
You could go with a lavender, like this
Yes.
color.
Oh,
And
yeah.
And it would kind of blend with both, or even a gray sometimes is a good option when you're just trying to bridge all of them and not draw attention.
Or you don't want to change threads 100 million times.
Because that's
true.
That's a lot.
It
That's
is.
a lot of ends to bury.
Yes. Yes, it is. I think that your thread choice is definitely going to affect a monochromatic. Now, on my Alice in Wonderland quilts, like I use that ombre fabric. Mm-hmm. So what was really kind of a surprise to me is when I chose the thread color that I didn't want to break for all my background work, when it was on the dark ones, it was a lighter thread color, so it stood out. But when it went into the middle of it where my scene was, it disappeared because I matched the center. And so it had this really neat effect where you saw it and then it disappeared and then you saw it again, depending on what side of the ombre you were looking at. And I didn't expect that when I chose the thread, but man, I was happy that happened because it was like, oh, this makes it look even more cool than it did. So be willing to play with that too. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The ombre fabric is definitely a different beast to work with because anytime you cut that up,
Could be anything.
It changes so much. And one of the most, I tell you what, that the Lucky Star that we had hanging last, that would be gorgeous in ombre strips, I think. It would just have those interesting stars, I think would.
Depends on how it's cut.
Yeah. But again, I think monochromatic quilts are beautiful, stunning. They have to have a thoughtfulness in the placement and design for them to be successful.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's a great quilt technique, but just look at them. I think you could probably type in monochromatic quilts and see some cool stuff. Mm-hmm. I haven't done that, though. I just looked up what it meant.
So, Lynn, what's orange and smells like teal fabric?
A flight of fancy?
Orange fabric. The dad jokes are running thin as we're panicking and prepping for market. If you have a silly fabric pun, please leave it and give us some ideas. You can leave a comment on the blog or in the YouTube episode.
Like how bad these jokes are?
Facebook group. What's up, stitches? So that's all we have for this episode. Today's show is made possible by EnMart and QT Fabrics. You can find links to these wonderful companies in the show notes for today's episode.
We'd like to thank 77 Peaches and Big Think Productions for helping produce this stitch. If you've enjoyed the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And don't forget to turn on the notifications on YouTube.
Our next virtual stitch-in is Friday, November 8th at 7 p.m. U.S. Eastern, broadcast live on our YouTube channel. Our book club is temporarily interrupted due to travel, but stay tuned for a very special episode in its place at the end of October.
Do we know what that is?
Yes.
All those details and more can be found on our website, thestitchtvshow.com, along with links to purchase fan gear, quilt patterns, video classes. And you can tune in next time for more Quilting Chat with Friends.